The crack of steel against bone echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Officer Nicholas Whitehead stood over the handcuffed man he'd just kicked, smirking. Another drifter taught a lesson. But the man on the floor didn't scream. Didn't flinch. He just looked up steady, unflinching, like he'd been waiting for this. Whitehead thought he'd broken him. He had no idea he'd just assaulted a Navy SEAL. A Tier 1 operator with 6 combat deployments and a federal claim that could expose a billion-dollar conspiracy. 27 witnesses watched Judge Patricia Caldwell smile and lie. The defendant lunged. Kevin Vincent's own attorney, a broken public defender named Todd Durham, sat frozen. He'd seen this exact scheme destroy innocent Marines for years ago. But this time, someone was recording. A woman in the back row. And when she walked out of that courtroom, she made one phone call. That's when everything they'd built began to collapse. 18 hours earlier. Todd Durham wasn't supposed to care anymore. At 48 years old, he'd mastered the art of surviving not living. His one-bedroom apartment in Logan Heights told the story. Overdue bills stacked on the counter. Dishes in the sink, and a half-empty bottle of bourbon sitting on the shelf like a loaded gun. 11 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days sober. He counted every single one. Because 4 years ago, Todd Durham had been someone else entirely. He'd been a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The guy who went after corrupt cops, dirty politicians, defense contractors bleeding, taxpayer money dry. He'd been married to a woman who believed in him. He'd had a daughter, Emma, 17 now, who used to stay up waiting when he worked late cases. Then came the Coronado Barracks case. 3 Marines from the naval base. Wrongful death lawsuits against Westfield Defense Group, a $4 billion DoD contractor. Todd had uncovered evidence, falsified logistics reports from combat zones, fraudulent billing, kickbacks to military procurement officers. The Marines had witnessed it all overseas. They were ready to testify. Then they were arrested. Drug charges. Manufactured evidence planted in their barracks. Todd's supervisor Rachel Sullivan told him to drop it. National security. Chain of command. Let it go. Todd refused. So she buried him instead. The Marines went to prison. Todd's evidence vanished. His marriage collapsed. His law license was stripped for ethical violations he never committed. Emma stopped answering his calls. He spiraled into a bottle for 2 years before clawing his way back to a public defender job, the only work a disgraced prosecutor could get. Now he had a caseload of 200 files. Defendants who couldn't afford real lawyers. People the system had already decided were guilty. Todd showed up. Went through the motions. Collected his paycheck. Stared at that bourbon bottle. And survived. If you've ever watched someone get crushed by something bigger than themselves, stay with me. Because what Todd was about to find in that case file would force him to choose between survival and redemption. That Tuesday morning, Todd sat in his cramped office, cracked plaster walls, buzzing fluorescent light, second-hand desk, staring at a new case file on his desk. People v. Kevin Vincent. Traffic stop. Resisting arrest. Assault on a peace officer. Black male, 28 years old, active duty Navy SEAL. Todd almost laughed. Another veteran about to get chewed up. He flipped through the file. Body cam footage denied. Breathalyzer results denied. Witness statements. None taken. Then he saw it. Buried on page 7. Subject filed VA disability claim 3 weeks prior. Claim pending review. Todd's hand stopped. VA claim. Military contractor case. Manufactured arrest. He'd seen this exact pattern before. 4 years ago. His hand started shaking. They were doing it again. 24 hours before that courtroom. Kevin Vincent had been in San Diego for less than 36 hours. He'd driven up from Coronado Naval Base in his beat-up 2015 Ford Ranger to surprise his little sister, Marina, for her UC San Diego graduation. After 6 years of deployments, Afghanistan, Syria, the Horn of Africa, he'd finally earned his Navy SEAL trident. This was supposed to be one perfect night before shipping out again. They'd celebrated at a restaurant in the Gaslamp Quarter. Marina had just been accepted into Stanford's biomedical engineering PhD program. Their parents both gone now, their father a retired Marine killed by an IED in Fallujah when Kevin was 19 would have been proud. At 11:47 p.m., Kevin was driving Marina back to her apartment. Harbor Drive. Light traffic. Clear night. The USS Midway Museum glowing in the distance. Then blue and red lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Kevin pulled over immediately. Placed both hands on the steering wheel. Fingers spread, visible. Marina tensed beside him. "It's fine," Kevin said quietly. "Just stay calm." Officer Nicholas Whitehead approached not from the driver's side, but from the passenger side where Marina sat. Tactical positioning. Aggressive. License and registration. Whitehead barked through Marina's window. Good evening, officer. Kevin said, voice steady. My license is in my wallet. Registration's in the glove box. I'm reaching for them now. I didn't ask for a story. Hand them over. Kevin complied. Passed over his Florida driver's license and vehicle registration. Whitehead squinted at the documents under his flashlight. Kevin Vincent. Long way from Florida. I'm stationed at Coronado Naval Base, sir. Active duty Navy. Navy. Whitehead's tone sharpened. You got ID for that? Yes, sir. My military ID is in my wallet, behind the license. But Whitehead didn't ask for it. Instead, he leaned down, shining his flashlight into the cab. You been drinking tonight, Vincent? No, sir. You swerved back there. Crossed the center line. Kevin's jaw tightened. That was a lie. He'd been driving perfectly. Marina knew it. And somewhere, a dashcam knew it. I didn't swerve, officer. I'm happy to take a breathalyzer. Whitehead's hand moved to his holster. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I haven't. Now. Kevin looked at Marina. Her eyes were wide, terrified. He gave her the smallest nod. Stay quiet. Let me handle this. He stepped out. If you've ever been in a situation where compliance doesn't matter, where the outcome was already decided before you even spoke, you know what Kevin felt in that moment. Because what happened next was textbook. Within 3 minutes, Kevin was face down on the asphalt, hands cuffed behind his back. Whitehead's knee grinding into his spine. You're under arrest for DUI, resisting arrest, and assaulting a peace officer. Kevin hadn't resisted. Hadn't touched Whitehead. But the charges were already being radioed to dispatch. Marina was screaming. And Kevin realized this wasn't random. This arrest had been planned. Kevin Vincent spent the night in a holding cell that smelled of bleach, sweat, and fear. He'd been processed. Printed. Photographed. Stripped of his belt, shoelaces, wallet. His phone confiscated. When he asked for his one phone call, the booking sergeant, a man named Matt Golden, with dead eyes and a badge that had seen too many years, laughed. Phone systems down. Budget cuts. Kevin knew that was a lie. He also knew there was nothing he could do about it. The cell was 6 feet by 8 feet. Concrete bench. Metal toilet. Fluorescent light that never turned off. Kevin sat upright, back straight, breathing controlled. In SEAL training, they'd taught him how to survive isolation. How to compartmentalize. How to wait. But this wasn't training. This was real. And the longer he sat there, the more pieces started clicking together. The traffic stop had been too clean. Whitehead had known exactly what to say. Exactly how to escalate. The charges were prefabricated. And Marina, his sister, had been forced to watch. They'd arrested him in front of her deliberately. To send a message. But to who? Kevin replayed the last 3 weeks. The deployment to Somalia. The classified operation. The Westfield Defense Group contractors embedded with his SEAL team. The discrepancies he'd noticed in their supply manifests, equipment that didn't match the paperwork. Shipments that disappeared. The conversation with his commanding officer about filing a formal report. And then, 2 weeks ago, Kevin had filed a VA disability claim. For hearing loss and shrapnel scarring from an IED explosion during that Somalia operation. An explosion that shouldn't have happened. An explosion caused by faulty equipment Westfield had contracted. Kevin's stomach dropped. They weren't targeting him because he was black. They were targeting him because he'd started asking questions. By dawn, 2 deputies, Nate Holden and Deb Lowe, dragged him from the cell without a word. They transported him through a dimly lit concrete tunnel beneath the courthouse, metal pipes dripping condensation overhead, emergency lighting casting shadows on the walls. He still hadn't been allowed his phone call. He still hadn't been read his full rights. When they shoved him into the courthouse, holding room, concrete walls, linoleum floor. CCTV camera watching his every move. Kevin realized something that made his blood run cold. No one knew where he was. Not his commanding officer. Not his unit. Not even Marina. She'd tried to follow the police car. But they'd threatened to arrest her too if she didn't back off. Kevin Vincent, a decorated Navy SEAL with top secret clearance, had disappeared into the system. And the system was designed to make people like him vanish. My mother told me nobody cares about stories like this. That exposing corruption just gets you ignored. But you're still here, which means she was wrong. If this is making your blood boil, prove her wrong with me. Hit that subscribe button so the algorithm pushes this to someone who needs to see it. Drop truth in the comments if you're still watching. Share this with someone fighting their own battle against a system that wants them silent. Let's make sure Kevin's story and the hundreds like him don't disappear into the dark. At 9 a.m., Kevin Vincent was escorted into courtroom 3. Judge Patricia Caldwell presided mid-50s, silver hair pulled into a severe bun, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a face that had forgotten how to smile unless it served a purpose. 20 years on the bench. Up for re-election. A reputation for being tough on crime. Which really meant tough on people who couldn't fight back. Sitting at the defense table was Todd Durham. Kevin had never seen a lawyer look so defeated. Todd's suit was wrinkled. His tie crooked. His hands trembled as he shuffled through papers that clearly hadn't been read until an hour ago. When Kevin sat down handcuffed to the table, Todd leaned over and whispered, "Mr. Vincent. I'm Todd Durham, your public defender. Look, I got your file this morning. Officer Whitehead says you were driving erratically, refused a breathalyzer. Took a swing at him. Prosecutors pushing for 6 months county jail, 3 years, probation. If you plead guilty, I can probably get the assault charge dropped." Kevin stared at him. "I didn't do any of that." Todd's expression didn't change. "I understand you're upset. But this is how it works. You plead out, you do your time, you move on." "I'm a Navy SEAL," Kevin said quietly. "I have a top-secret clearance. A conviction ends my career. So, no. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do." Todd blinked. For the first time, he actually looked at Kevin. Saw him. "All rise." Judge Caldwell swept in. Her black robe swirling. She didn't look at Kevin. She looked at the clock. Case number 24-CR8847. People vs. Kevin Vincent. Charges: DUI, resisting arrest, assault on a peace officer. How does the defendant plead? Todd stood. His voice barely audible. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The courtroom went silent. Judge Caldwell's gaze snapped to Kevin. Cold. Calculating. "Not guilty?" She leaned forward. "Officer Whitehead's report is quite detailed, Mr. Vincent. Says you were belligerent. Refused to comply. Says you swung at him." "That's a lie, Your Honor," Kevin said, his voice calm but steel-edged. "Excuse me? I didn't resist. I didn't drink. I didn't assault anyone. I requested a breathalyzer denied. I requested body cam footage denied. I requested my phone call denied. This entire proceeding is a violation of my constitutional rights." The gallery stirred. Murmurs rippled through the benches. Officer Nicholas Whitehead, standing near the witness box in full uniform, laughed a sharp, ugly sound. "He's a sea lawyer, Judge. Probably picked up some fancy words watching TV in lockup." Kevin's eyes locked onto Whitehead. And in that moment, Whitehead saw something that made his smirk falter. Kevin Vincent wasn't scared. He was analyzing. "Approach the bench." Judge Caldwell hissed. Todd stood, but Kevin remained seated, his gaze still fixed on Whitehead. "Mr. Vincent," Caldwell said, her voice dripping venom. "In this county, my word is law. You think you can come into my courtroom and lecture me on rights? I don't care if you claim to be Navy. I don't care if you think you're special. Bail is set at $75,000. Your Honor." Todd protested weakly. "That's excessive for a misdemeanor. He assaulted an officer." Caldwell yelled. "And if he speaks out of turn one more time, I'll hold him in contempt." Kevin looked at the American flag in the corner of the room. The gold fringe caught the light. He'd bled for that flag. Watched friends die for it. And now these people were using it as camouflage for corruption. "Officer Whitehead," Kevin said, his voice dropping an octave. "Where's the body cam footage from the traffic stop?" Whitehead's jaw tightened. "Malfunction. Technical error. Convenient." "Shut up," Whitehead snarled, stepping toward the defense table. The bailiff didn't stop him. "You shut your mouth, boy, or I'll shut it for you." Kevin looked up at Whitehead. Completely unfazed. That look, the complete absence of fear, broke something in Whitehead. He was used to fear. He needed fear. When he didn't get it, he panicked. Whitehead drew back his leg. "No." Todd shouted. Too late. Whitehead's boot slammed into Kevin's ribs. The chair tipped backward. Kevin hit the floor hard, handcuffs biting into his wrists. Wind knocked out of him. The courtroom gasped. Judge Caldwell stood, but quickly recovered. The defendant lunged. "I saw it." Officer Whitehead was protecting this court. Kevin lay on the floor. Tasted blood. Felt the bruising already forming around his ribs. He took a slow breath. Then another. And then, he smiled, cold. Terrifying, not reaching his eyes. That, Kevin whispered, was a mistake. Because in the back row, the woman with the navy blazer was still filming. And Todd Durham, for the first time in 4 years, felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Rage. "My mother told me nobody would care about stories like this. That exposing corruption wouldn't change anything. That I'd never reach people who needed to hear it. But you're still here. If this moment hit you, if you believe stories like Kevin's deserve witnesses, hit that like button right now. Comment, justice, if you're still with me. Share this with someone fighting their own system. Subscribe so these stories don't disappear into silence. Because they won't tell themselves. What Todd didn't know was that the woman filming wasn't a journalist. She was a federal investigator. And Kevin Vincent's arrest had just activated a 3-year operation. Todd Durham sat alone in the attorney consultation booth, staring at Kevin Vincent's case file spread across the chipped laminate table. His hands were still shaking. Not from withdrawal. From rage he'd buried 4 years ago. He'd just watched a cop kick a handcuffed man in open court. Watched a judge smile while she lied about it. And he'd sat there frozen just like before. The Marines. The evidence. Rachel Sullivan burying everything while 3 innocent men went to prison. And Todd had done nothing. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Area code 202. Washington, D.C. Todd stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Mr. Durham, my name is Gilberto Lopez. I'm a senior investigator with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. I need to talk to you about Kevin Vincent. Todd's throat tightened. And about what really happened to those 3 Marines 4 years ago. The booth suddenly felt smaller. Colder. The Coronado Barracks case. Todd whispered. You didn't fail them, Todd. You were set up. Rachel Sullivan buried your evidence because her husband Kurt Rhodes, CFO of Westfield Defense Group, paid her to. We've been building a federal case against Westfield for 3 years. Wiretaps. Financial records. Testimonies from dozens of veterans they've targeted. But we needed proof of the local coordination. We needed to catch them in the act. Todd stood up, nearly knocking over his chair. Kevin Vincent. Kevin filed a VA disability claim 3 weeks ago. For injury sustained during a classified operation in Somalia, an op where Westfield provided faulty equipment that nearly killed his entire SEAL team. The moment he filed the claim, their algorithm flagged him as a liability. They fed his information to local PD through a federal grant program. Officer Whitehead was paid $15,000 to manufacture that arrest. Todd's mind raced. Judge Caldwell. On Westfield's payroll. $25,000 per case. So is the prosecutor. It's a machine, Todd. They target veterans with pending claims. Arrest them on fabricated charges. Then give them a choice: drop your claim and walk away, or fight us and lose everything. Your career. Your benefits, your freedom. Most veterans take the deal. The charges disappear. Westfield's liability disappears. The system stays clean. Except the veterans. Todd said. Except the veterans. But Kevin didn't take the deal. And now they've made a critical mistake. They assaulted a decorated Navy SEAL in open court. We have it on video. Melissa Newton, my lead investigator, recorded everything. We recovered the body cam footage Whitehead tried to delete. We have his phone records showing payments from a Westfield shell company. We have Caldwell's bank statements showing deposits on the same dates as veteran arrests. Todd paced the narrow booth, his pulse hammering. Why are you calling me? Because you're Kevin's attorney. And because you're the only person in that courtroom who looked like he still had a soul. I need you to keep Kevin alive for the next 72 hours. Don't let him take a plea. Don't let him get transferred to county lockup. Westfield has corrections officers on payroll. If Kevin disappears into general population, he'll never make it to trial. You're asking me to put my career on the line. I'm asking you to be the prosecutor you used to be. File motions. Demand hearings. Stall. Make noise. Make them scared. And when federal marshals walk into that courthouse in 3 days, I need you standing next to Kevin Vincent. Todd looked at his reflection in the frosted glass partition. Saw the ghost of the man he used to be. I'm 11 months sober, Todd said quietly. My 17-year-old daughter hasn't returned my calls in 2 years. I'm 1 suspension away from losing my law license permanently. If I do this, if I go to war with the U.S. Attorney's office, it's going to cost me everything I have left. Lopez was silent for a moment. I know. But if you don't, Kevin Vincent is going to vanish. And 300 other veterans, Marines, SEALs, Army Rangers who served this country, are going to keep getting destroyed by this machine. You're the only one who can stop it, Todd. You're the only one who knows the playbook. Todd closed his eyes. Saw Kevin's face. Saw the 3 Marines. Saw Emma, 7 years old, waiting up for him after a late case. He opened his eyes. Tell me what you need. Now I need you to do something for me. If you've ever seen someone stand at a crossroads like this, knowing the right choice will cost them everything, drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Would you risk it all for a stranger? Tag someone who needs to see what happens when one person decides enough is enough. Because what comes next 72 hours from this phone call is going to shake an entire city. Meanwhile, 5 miles away on the Embarcadero waterfront, Melissa Newton stood watching the sunset over San Diego Bay, phone pressed to her ear. "He's in," she said. "Durham's going to fight." Lopez exhaled. "Good. Now we wait for Westfield to make their next move." Melissa watched a cargo ship glide silently across the harbor. "And when they do?" she asked. "We bury them." 72 hours later. Judge Patricia Caldwell was in the middle of sentencing a shoplifter to 6 months when the doors to courtroom 3 exploded open. Not figuratively. The double doors slammed against the walls with enough force to crack the plaster. Every head in the courtroom turned. Marching down the center aisle was a phalanx of 6 men in full tactical gear. Navy SEALs. Rifles slung across their chests. Helmets on. Faces obscured by ballistic eyewear. They moved with terrifying precision. Silent, synchronized, unstoppable. In the center of the formation walked a man in navy dress blues. Silver-haired. Granite-faced. 3 stars gleaming on his collar. Admiral Thomas Creighton. And beside him, walking freely, was Kevin Vincent. The courtroom went silent. Judge Caldwell's gavel froze midair. Her face drained of color. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, slamming the gavel down. "Bailiff, arrest these men immediately." Admiral Creighton stopped at the bar, the wooden railing separating the gallery from the proceedings. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Judge Patricia Caldwell. I am Admiral Thomas Creighton, United States Navy. You are currently presiding over a criminal conspiracy disguised as a court of law." Caldwell's face flushed scarlet. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is a civilian court." "Bailiff, I said arrest them." The bailiff, Constance McFarland, a woman in her 50s who'd been collecting a paycheck in this courtroom for 20 years, looked at the SEALs. Looked at their weapons. Looked at the 3-star admiral standing 10 feet away. Then she looked at her taser. She raised her hand slowly and stepped away from the bench. "I'm not doing that, Judge." Outside on the courthouse steps, chaos had already erupted. 3 black SUVs with federal government plates had blockaded Civic Center Drive. A mobile command center, a converted RV, bristling with satellite dishes and communication arrays, sat parked at the curb. Federal marshals in Navy windbreakers were cordoning off the entire courthouse entrance with yellow tape. News vans screeched to a halt. Cameras swiveled. Reporters scrambled out, shouting questions. And standing at the center of it all, calm as stone, was Gilberto Lopez in a charcoal suit and an expression sharp enough to cut steel. He held up his credentials. "Gilberto Lopez, Department of Defense Inspector General. This courthouse is now under federal jurisdiction. We are executing arrest warrants for Judge Patricia Caldwell, Officer Nicholas Whitehead, Captain Darrell O'Connor of the San Diego Police Department, and U.S. Attorney Rachel Sullivan." A woman in the crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted over each other. Inside the courtroom, Melissa Newton, the woman who'd been recording everything 3 days ago, stepped forward. She placed a black Pelican case on the defense table, opened it, and pulled out a laptop and portable projector. "We are invoking the Patriot Act and federal RICO statutes," Newton stated, her voice calm, clinical. "We have declared this courthouse a crime scene due to the systematic targeting of United States military personnel for financial profit." "This is insane," Caldwell hissed, gripping the bench. "You can't just storm into my courtroom and—" Newton pressed a button. A projection screen descended from the ceiling with a mechanical hum. The lights dimmed. The footage began. High definition. Crystal clear. Undeniable. The courtroom watched Kevin Vincent's traffic stop in real time. Watched him comply with every single command. Watched Officer Whitehead escalate without provocation. Watched the manufactured arrest unfold exactly as Kevin had said it did. Then the footage switched. Courtroom security camera. 3 days ago. Kevin handcuffed to the defense table. Whitehead's boot connecting with his ribs, the sickening crack audible even through the speakers. Judge Caldwell's face in perfect clarity, watching it happen, then lying without hesitation. The defendant lunged. The gallery erupted. Whispers exploded into shouts. People stood up from their seats. Todd Durham rose slowly, his voice cutting through the noise. "You lied. You watched a police officer kick a handcuffed man in your courtroom, and you covered it up." Judge Caldwell slumped in her chair, her face drained to ash. "Here's what I need you to understand this moment. This is what happens when one person refuses to stay quiet." Todd Durham could have walked away. Could have let Kevin take the plea deal. Could have protected himself. But he didn't. And because he made that choice, 300 other veterans are about to get justice too. If you believe stories like this need to be told, if you think the people who bury the truth deserve to be exposed, don't just watch. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. Tag someone who needs to see this. Because the algorithm buries videos like this unless people like you fight for them. Let's make sure this story reaches everyone who needs to hear it. Admiral Creighton nodded to the SEAL team leader, a hulking operator named Dutch. Secure the package. 2 SEALs moved up the steps to the bench. Caldwell scrambled backward, tripping over her robe, knocking her gavel to the floor with a metallic clatter. Get your hands off me. I am a judge. Not anymore, Dutch said, zip-tying her wrists behind her back. As they dragged Judge Caldwell out of the courtroom, her screams echoing down the hallway, Gilberto Lopez entered, flanked by 4 federal marshals. Officer Nicholas Whitehead. Captain Darrell O'Connor. You are under arrest for conspiracy, deprivation of rights under color of law, assault on a federal asset, and racketeering under the RICO Act. You will be processed in federal court. Whitehead's knees buckled. He slumped against the wall, his face pale, his hands trembling. Kevin Vincent watched them being led away in handcuffs. His ribs still ached from where Whitehead had kicked him. But the pain felt distant, now replaced by something colder. Sharper. Justice. Todd Durham approached Kevin slowly, extending his hand. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you at the beginning. Kevin shook his hand firmly. You fought when it mattered most. 48 hours later. Reichel Sullivan sat in an interrogation room at the federal building downtown, hands folded on the cold metal table. She'd been arrested at her office that morning, walked out in handcuffs in front of her entire staff. Cameras. Reporters. Whispers. Across from her sat Gilberto Lopez and Melissa Newton. You've been a U.S. attorney for 15 years, Lopez said. You've put away murderers, drug traffickers, corrupt officials. What happened to you? Reichel's jaw tightened. I want my lawyer. Your husband is the CFO of Westfield Defense Group. Newton continued, ignoring her. A company currently under federal investigation for defrauding the Department of Defense out of $1.2 billion. A company that systematically targets veterans who filed disability claims or wrongful death lawsuits. A company that paid you through shell accounts we've already frozen to bury cases. Reichel said nothing. Lopez slid a document across the table. Thick. Tabbed. Evidence markers on every page. This is a ledger. Westfield's internal records. It lists every veteran they've targeted in the past 5 years. 317 names. Kevin Vincent is number 318. He pointed to a highlighted section. Next to each name is a dollar amount. How much Westfield stood to lose if that veteran's claim went through. Next to Kevin's name. $2.4 million. That's what Westfield would have owed in liability damages if his disability claim was approved. Lopez leaned forward. So they paid Officer Whitehead $15,000 to manufacture an arrest. They paid Judge Caldwell $25,000 to fast-track a conviction. And they paid you $50,000 to make sure the body cam footage disappeared and the case never saw a jury. Reichel's hands started trembling. You destroyed lives for money, Lopez said. You sent innocent people to prison to protect a defense contractor's bottom line. How do you sleep at night? Raquel looked up, her eyes hollow, red-rimmed. You don't understand. My husband, he told me it was just paperwork. That no one would get hurt. That we were protecting jobs. Westfield employs thousands of people. If those lawsuits went through, the company would collapse. Families would lose everything. So, you chose the company over the veterans who served this country. Newton said coldly. Raquel broke. Tears streamed down her face. Mascara smeared. Hands shaking. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't know they would actually hurt people. I thought. You knew, Lopez interrupted. You knew 4 years ago when you buried Todd Durham's evidence. You knew when those 3 Marines went to prison for crimes they didn't commit. You've known every single time. Silence. Raquel buried her face in her hands. Outside the interrogation room, Todd Durham stood with Kevin Vincent, watching through the one-way mirror. That's her, Todd said quietly. The woman who destroyed my career. My marriage. My relationship with my daughter. My entire life. Kevin looked at him. You got a second chance. What are you going to do with it? Todd was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. Scrolled through a contact he hadn't called in 2 years. Emma. He hit dial. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then, Dad. Todd's throat tightened. His eyes burned. Hi, sweetheart. I know it's been a while. I know I messed up. But I need you to know something. I'm not that person anymore. I'm fighting again. And I'm going to make you proud. There was a long pause. The kind of pause that holds the weight of 2 years of silence. Of unanswered calls. Of broken promises. Then Emma said, I saw the news. About the Navy SEAL. About you standing up to that judge. Another pause. Dad. I'm already proud. Todd closed his eyes. Tears streamed down his face. For the first time in 4 years, he let himself believe it. Westfield Defense Group's headquarters sat on Harbor Island, a gleaming glass and steel tower overlooking San Diego Bay. Clean, professional, respectable. But inside, it was a machine built to destroy lives. Gilberto Lopez led a team of federal agents through the main entrance at 7:32 that morning, flashing his DoD Inspector General credentials. The receptionist, a young woman named Tommy Fry, went pale when she saw the badges. "We have warrants to seize all electronic records, financial documents, and personnel files," Lopez announced. "This building is now a federal crime scene." 22 floors above, in the executive boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, Kurt Rhodes sat at the head of a dark wood conference table. Silver-haired, expensively suited. The kind of face that had never known real consequence. Reichel Sullivan's husband. Westfield's chief financial officer. The architect. When Lopez and Melissa Newton entered, flanked by federal marshals, Kurt didn't stand. "You have no right to be here," Kurt said calmly. "Westfield Defense Group is a private corporation. We have contracts with the Department of Defense. You're interfering with national security operations." Lopez smiled. "Mr. Rhodes, your company has been under federal investigation for 3 years. We have your financial records, your emails, recordings of phone calls between you, Judge Caldwell, Officer Whitehead, and your wife. We know about Operation Clearwater." Kurt's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the armrest. Newton opened her laptop. "Operation Clearwater. That's what you called it internally. A systematic program to identify military personnel filing disability claims or wrongful death lawsuits against Westfield. You created an algorithm fed by VA databases you illegally accessed that flagged veterans as high-risk liability threats. Then you passed their information to local police departments through federal grant programs disguised as veteran outreach initiatives. The police manufactured arrests." Lopez continued. "Judges on your payroll fast-tracked convictions. And the veterans were given a choice: drop your claim or lose everything. Your career, your benefits, your family, your freedom." "Most of them dropped their claims," Newton said. "Because they were terrified. Because they had children. Because they didn't have the resources to fight back. You stole their futures. You bankrupted them. You destroyed their lives. All to save your company a few $1 million in liability payouts." Kurt leaned back in his chair. "You can't prove any of that." Newton turned the laptop screen toward him. An internal Westfield memo. 6 months old. Kurt's digital signature at the bottom. Subject: Q3 Liability Mitigation Strategy. Status: 47 high-risk claims neutralized. Projected savings: $18. 3M. Recommend continued coordination with local law enforcement partners. Expand to additional jurisdictions. Kurt's face went ashen. "You're under arrest," Lopez said. "Conspiracy. Racketeering. Fraud. Obstruction of justice. Your company's assets are frozen. Your government contracts are terminated. And every single veteran you targeted is going to get their day in court." Federal marshals zip-tied Kurt's wrists behind his back. He looked at Lopez with pure hatred. "You're destroying thousands of jobs. Westfield employs over 40,000 people. You're going to collapse an entire industry." Lopez leaned in close. "Good. If your industry is built on the backs of broken veterans, it deserves to collapse." That night, federal agents raided a Westfield storage facility in Barrio Logan, a warehouse with chain-link fencing and rusted loading docks. Inside, they found something that made even the seasoned investigators go silent. Filing cabinets. Hundreds of them. Each one filled with case files on targeted veterans. Names. Service records. Disability claims. Arrest reports. Bank records. Home addresses. Family photographs. A database of human suffering. And in the center of the warehouse, locked in a fireproof safe, was a ledger. Handwritten notes in blue ink. Subject: Kevin Vincent. Asset value: $2. 4M. Disposal method: indefinite incarceration. Reason: high risk. SEAL training. Persistent. Eliminate. Kevin Vincent stood in the warehouse doorway, staring at his own name written in someone else's handwriting. "They were going to kill you," Todd said quietly beside him. Kevin nodded. "They were going to try. But here's the thing about stories like this: they only survive when people refuse to look away. You've made it this far. That matters. If you believe these stories deserve witnesses, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Let's keep breathing life into what they tried to silence." The warehouse raid had been surgical. No shots fired. No casualties. Westfield's security team rent-a-cops who'd never faced federal operators surrendered the moment the marshals breached the perimeter. But what they found inside was devastating. Melissa Newton stood in the center of the Logan Heights warehouse, surrounded by filing cabinets stacked floor to ceiling. Her phone was pressed to her ear. "Lopez, you need to see this. It's worse than we thought." Gilberto Lopez arrived within 20 minutes. When he saw the files, his jaw clenched. 317 veterans, Newton said, her voice hollow. "But there are over 1,000 files here. They've been doing this for a decade." Lopez pulled a file at random. Marine Corporal. Deployed to Iraq in 2011. Filed a wrongful death claim after his best friend was killed by faulty body armor. Westfield had supplied. Arrested 6 weeks later on drug charges. Convicted. Died in prison 2 years later from untreated PTSD. He opened another. Army Sergeant. Disability claim for traumatic brain injury. Arrested for domestic violence charges later proven false. But not before he lost custody of his 2 kids. Another file. Another destroyed life. Another family shattered. Lopez opened file after file. Each one a story. Each one a veteran who'd served their country, only to be hunted by the system they'd sworn to protect. How many lives did they destroy? Newton whispered. Lopez didn't answer. Because the truth was staring at him from 1,000 manila folders. This wasn't just corruption. This was industrial-scale destruction of American heroes. That evening, Kevin Vincent stood on a wooden dock near Harbor Island, staring out at the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and crimson. Todd Durham approached quietly. "You okay?" Kevin didn't turn around. "They had a file on me. Detailed. My entire service record. My deployments. My family. My sister Marina. They knew everything about me before I ever got pulled over. They're going to pay for it," Todd said. "Are they?" Kevin finally looked at him. "Kurt Rhodes will hire the best defense team money can buy. Reichel Sullivan will cut a deal and testify against everyone else. Judge Caldwell will claim she was coerced. And in 5 years, they'll all be out of prison, living in some gated community in Arizona, while the veterans they destroyed are still broken." Todd was silent. Because Kevin was right. The system protected its own. Even when they were caught. "But you know what?" Kevin continued, his voice softer now. "It doesn't matter. Because those 1,000 files. Those are 1,000 veterans who now have evidence. 1,000 lawsuits Westfield can't bury. 1,000 families who finally get to see justice." He looked at Todd. "You gave me that. You could have walked away. You could have stayed quiet like you did 4 years ago. But you didn't." Todd shook his head. "I just did what I should have done back then." "Yeah," Kevin said. "You did." They stood in silence, watching the sun disappear into the Pacific. Stories like the stories about veterans being targeted. About broken lawyers finding redemption, they don't go viral on their own. They survive because people like you refuse to let them disappear. If this story matters to you, hit that like button. Drop a comment, even just one word. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Share it. Because the algorithm buries what we ignore, and amplifies what we fight for. Don't let this be another story that gets buried. But the story wasn't over. Because 3 weeks later, Kevin Vincent received a phone call that would change everything one more time. 3 months later. The trial was over. Judge Patricia Caldwell. 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy and deprivation of rights. Officer Nicholas Whitehead. 12 years for assault, falsifying evidence, and racketeering. Captain Daryl O'Connor. 10 years for conspiracy and obstruction. Reichel Sullivan. 8 years after cooperating with prosecutors. Kurt Rhodes. 25 years for leading the criminal enterprise. Westfield Defense Group, dissolved. Assets liquidated. $480 million in settlement funds established for the victims. Kevin Vincent stood on the steps of the federal courthouse, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. Cameras flashing. Microphones shoved in his face. But he didn't want to be there. He wanted to be back at Coronado Naval Base. Back with his team. Back where he belonged. But first, there was one more thing he needed to do. Kevin found Todd Durham sitting on a bench near the Botanical Building Lagoon in Balboa Park, watching his daughter Emma feed ducks at the edge of the pond. Emma was 17. Dark-haired. With her father's eyes. She'd driven down from Los Angeles, where she lived with her mother, to spend the weekend with Todd. The first time they'd seen each other in over a year. Kevin approached quietly. "Mr. Durham." Todd looked up, surprised. "Kevin. What are you doing here?" "I wanted to say thank you. Properly." Todd stood. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do." Kevin extended his hand. "You saved my life. You risked everything. Your career. Your sobriety. Your relationship with your daughter. You didn't have to do that." Todd shook his hand, his grip firm but trembling. "Yes, I did. Because 4 years ago, I didn't. And I've had to live with it every single day. Emma walked over, curious. Dad, who's this? This is Kevin Vincent, Todd said, his voice thick with emotion. The man I told you about. Emma's eyes widened. The Navy SEAL. Kevin smiled. Just a guy who got lucky. No, Emma said, shaking her head. You're a hero. And so is my dad. Todd's eyes filled with tears. He pulled Emma into a hug, the kind of embrace that carries years of apology, forgiveness, and hope. Kevin stepped back, giving them space. He looked out over the park. Palm trees swaying in the breeze. The fountain sparkling in the sunlight. Families walking together. Laughing. Safe. This was what he fought for. Not courtrooms. Not headlines. Not revenge. This. Peace. Reconnection. Second chances. If you've made it this far, if Kevin and Todd's story meant something to you, here's what I need from you. Don't just watch and leave. Hit that like button so this reaches someone else who needs to see it. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit hardest. Was it the courtroom kick? Todd's choice to answer that phone? The conspiracy unraveling? And if someone in your life is fighting their own Goliath right now, share this with them. Let them know they're not alone. Subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. Because they're not just entertainment. They're reminders that systems can be beaten. That one person standing up can change everything. Kevin turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of families and tourists. He had a base to return to. A team waiting for him. A life to rebuild. But he'd never forget the broken public defender who found his courage again. Or the system they burned down together. Kevin Vincent stood at the edge of Sunset Cliffs, watching the Pacific crash against the rocks below. The sun was setting orange and purple bleeding across the horizon. His phone buzzed. A text from Marina. Proud of you, big brother. Dad would be too. Kevin smiled. Typed back, love you, sis. See you next week. He pocketed his phone and took a deep breath. The system had tried to break him. They'd arrested him. Assaulted him in open court. Tried to bury him in a machine designed to destroy veterans like him. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed he was alone. They didn't know about Todd Durham, a broken public defender who found his spine again when it mattered most. They didn't know about Gilberto Lopez, a federal investigator who'd spent 3 years building an airtight case. They didn't know about Melissa Newton, an agent who refused to let corruption hide in the shadows. And they didn't know about the 1,000 other veterans whose stories were finally being heard because one man refused to stay silent. Kevin had learned something that no tactical training could teach. You don't fight corruption alone. You fight it together. One phone call changed everything. Not because Kevin was a Navy SEAL. Not because he was special. But because when Todd Durham answered that call, he chose to become the man he used to be. The prosecutor who believed justice wasn't just a word on a courtroom wall. And that choice saved them both. Kevin turned from the cliffs and walked toward his truck. Tomorrow, he'd report back to Coronado. Rejoin his team. Deploy again. But tonight, he'd carry this truth. The system is only as strong as the people who refuse to let it corrupt them. Sometimes all it takes is one person, one broken, haunted, 11-month sober public defender to stand up and say, not this time. If this story reminded you why these battles matter, drop a comment below. What's the one moment that hit you hardest? Hit that like button if Todd's redemption felt earned. And if you know someone grinding through their own impossible fight right now, share this with them. Let them know they're not alone. Subscribe so stories like Kevin's and Todd's don't vanish into silence. Because the system counts on us forgetting. Let's prove them wrong. Thanks for being here.